everybody, and welcome to another exciting, fun-filled, hair-raising episode of Radiorama, where, as the name implies, I show you how to work on radios, but sometimes other things like record players and television sets and stereos. And today we have a 1936 Canadian model RCA 8T-2, not to be confused with the American 8T-2, which would have been in a more of a tombstone shape and not this shape. It's interesting because back in the day, the Canadian government wisely chose to tell all foreign manufacturers that if you wanted to sell things in their country, then you had to make it there. And so this is made in Canada, and it's probably got maybe one or two of the original Canadian made tubes. We see here we have some Canadian stickers here. Hydroelectric Power Commission of Ontario. And I'm not sure, I don't think this is an original power transformer. You wouldn't have it right up next to that. It's a Hammond. It's a Hammond transformer. It does say it's made in Canada, so I don't know. It probably is meant for handling anywhere from 20 to 60 hertz. That's why you have this much iron, which makes sense because just like in the U.S., a lot of Canada was really rural, and the utilities, in other words, the hertz that you would get out of the power plants could vary by region. Looks like it's had a repair tag. 15. It was repaired in 1986. And potentiometer something, new cord, a new 5Z4, a new 6F6, test all tubes, clean pots, aligned chassis. I can barely read it. Looks like it cost $53 and something cents. So it's had some work done to it. Obviously this is a replacement cord. I don't know what the deal with this electrolytic is, why it's all taped up like that. So I'm going to bring it up on a variac and see if it... The thing is, if you're going to bring something up like this, it's really important that you also have the ability to measure how much current it's pulling. And that way, if it starts pulling excessive current, you know there's a potential problem within it, and you don't want to power it up even more. You could damage something. This is a really nice power transformer, so I'd really hate to damage that. That's probably an expensive piece. Again, I'm not sure if that's original. I'll find out more once I get inside of it, but it is a heavy radio. The chassis is made out of extremely thick gauge steel. The speaker, everything on it's just built like an absolute tank. RCAs from this era tended to be pretty good. And I know a lot of collectors are all more about Zeniths, but this period of RCA is very good. You can see we even have the original sticker, cabinetry by RCA Victor. And it too, just like its American counterpart, has a phono connection. It's interesting that the text is exactly the same as the American versions. A model R93 record player attached here will make a fine phonograph of this radio, which is technically not really accurate from a technical perspective, but whatever. They had to make it layman terms for everyone else to understand. So let me get out my trusty variac and we'll power it up. Okay, so I've got my variac on. Put it on my lowest amp setting, bring it up a little bit, and check my voltage. Let's get it to about 50 volts and then monitor amp draw. It's not really drawing that much. And we have pilot lights, that's good. Let me see. I'm on medium wave. I need standard broadcast. Looks like the light for our standard broadcast is burned out. That's okay, we can replace that. Okay, 50 volts is not going to do much. Let's bring it up a little bit more. Again, let's check the Amperage draw, not much. It's about where it should be. That's good. Nothing's on fire. See if we have any volume.
The name's the most important thing for this segment. We can do the analysis like tomorrow or whatever. He's 60 to 1 at MGM to win Cy Young. If it's not Cole, which it could be, I don't think it's ever going to be Ohtani. Also, he could get traded, but even his numbers at this point in the season aren't particularly good. Strikeouts are really, really, really overrated for winning this.
Something about
On the Black Information Network.
Would you like to save money on here?
This rates out the best.
Issues impacting its parks in California and Texas, but guests who did attend spent 10% more per person compared to the year-ago quarter. Six years, sir.
Well, I'm not going to leave it on, but it seems like it's working really well. There's no humming or anything. Now, I had a hard time reading that repair tag. I didn't see anything in there that said they replaced any electrolytic capacitors. But the fact that it's clean makes me think that maybe they did. I don't know. So we'll know more once we pull that chassis out of there and take a look. Alright, well, what I found underneath is not surprising. The bare minimum has been done, which is the electrolytics were replaced, even though it looks like it's been a long time since that happened. And I am not familiar with what the trade between the United Kingdom and Canada was. I know Canada has more of a longer, stronger connection to the UK, but both of these electrolytics are British. You've got a Hunt's here, and then a TCC Micromite. Not familiar with that at all. I've seen these in a few British radios. The rest of these are all original. Actually, that's replaced as too. That's replaced as well. But the markings on these guys are done in such a way where it says, it says 0.100 here, and then 300. That means 1/10 of a microfarad at 300 volts. Likewise over here, 0.25 microfarads at 300 volts, 0.1, 0.015, and so forth. So that's how you read those values. These guys are sealed hard rubber mica caps, and they're generally okay unless they've been physically damaged, so you can leave those alone. It's important, I've noticed that both of the electrolytics in this thing have phenolic spacers between the chassis and ground, so we'll need to make sure that we observe that, because probably the ground for both of these electrolytic are floating and not going to chassis, which is a mistake that someone can easily make. I'm thinking in order to get to some of this, it might be easier for me to remove these sides, especially some of these caps that are back underneath there. That's probably why they made it to where you could remove it. Clever engineers. So, and I'm looking at the underside of the power transformer, and the quality of the soldering and everything makes me think it is factory, so maybe they got a good deal on Hammond transformers, which is unusual because Hammond made stuff for like ham radios and commercial equipment. That was an expensive piece of equipment. This must have been, I'm guessing this was probably done sometime in the 60s. Maybe this cap is from the 50s. That's a little bit later. So who knows? It might have been kept in service for quite a long time. You think about it, 1936 through 1960s. That's several decades at least. People kept electronics running a lot longer back then because they were very expensive. So it was worth your effort to try to keep them going and to pay the repair. So what I'm going to do is first probably take one side off at a time and then replace the electrolytics and then the paper caps that are in that area. And then I'll repeat on the other side. So let me unbolt this and see if we can get better access. Okay, now we got the side off here. It gives me easier access to some of this stuff here. And we can see clearly this is essentially a spacer underneath the electrolytic capacitor, but then there's like a fiber spacer underneath that. So this is the floating ground. So you want to make sure and put your negative here. Your positive is obviously this wire. Actually, it looks like there's two things connected. We can cut those short. But we're going to replace that, he says, after losing the parts that he was going to install. Okay, so we're going to replace that 16 microfarad capacitor with one of these. If you're new to the hobby, the stripe is your negative, and make sure you get that polarity right or they will explode very dramatically. Okay, I got the first electrolytic replaced, and you see what I do is I try to get them as close to their leads as possible. I'm gonna keep it nice and short so it's not going to wiggle around a lot, because I hate stuff like this where people install things and it's just like wiggly, loosey-goosey like that. You're just asking for an electrical short that way. So while I have that side cover off, I'm going to start replacing these guys. Not very easy to get at, especially weren't easy with this was still on there. But it looks like the capacitors that are kind of hugging this area are the most difficult to do, so I'll go ahead and get those out of the way. Then I'll move over to the other side and replace that electrolytic. Okay, so we've got this side, this corner recapped. I think that was the most difficult to replace caps in the set. So I can put this cover back on and do the same over the other side, take that cover off, see what's underneath, even though I don't think there's as much. Also will give me an opportunity to install a safety fuse over here. Okay, I pulled up the other cover. I can't read what that says. It says, I can get that, I think it's September 20th, 1939. I think it's someone's name. Maybe it's a repairman, or maybe it's somebody on the factory floor. I don't know. Definitely do not like this. I don't do electrical tape at all. But I'll need to install a fuse here because we've been doing this more and more with our transformer sets, which is if the transformer decides to go haywire, it'll just burn itself up. But if you have a fuse that limits the amount of inrushing current, then you can blow the fuse before you damage the transformer. So I'm looking at this, and I might be wrong about the transformer. There's some obvious burny stuff going on underneath here. It looks like that there's extra holes here. So I think the transformer in this guy did in fact blow at some point. Maybe it did earlier in its career, but whatever the fact, it did blow. And we want to protect it, keep it from blowing again. Alright, so this looks a little neater. Cut all that nasty tape out of there and directly soldered the cord to the switch, and then the other side goes to this fuse holder. This is the other side of the power transformer, so this is our fused protection, and I was able to leave the writing uncovered for the next person to discover. So I'll replace this one capacitor, and then we'll bolt this back on, and then I'll replace the rest of these paper capacitors. There's probably 1, 2, 3, 4 left. So this is actually a pretty easy set to work on. There's lots of room in there. All right, so the rest of the caps are all replaced. Everything's buttoned away. I can't believe how fast I got this done. I got this like done in an hour. And I was taking my time. I wasn't rushing. It's easy to get at stuff on this cabinet, or this chassis rather. So I'm going to flip it up right and make sure it still works. And I think I'm going to save the rest of it for tomorrow. There's no sense in rushing through this thing. All right, so we got it back in the cabinet. Let's go ahead and give it a test fire. All right, it's alive. I can't remember which one's volume. I think the volume's on the other side. Find out sure enough. The eye tube's very weak. Let's see.
For bankruptcy. The timing angers some people since it comes amid world go round. Go to another country.
Why are we the biggest country in the world, but when it comes to people of color, like we're fighting like I'm seeing talk about this reparations for us orders, and then
Himself.
This bishop is turning his back on these Catholic children whose parents entrusted this kid to these priests.
It's working good. So that's all I'm going to do for the evening. Start working on this tomorrow. I'm going to go sit out in the sun for a little while. Okay, as we saw from yesterday, the set was successfully recapped and overhauled, but now what I want to do is do some fine detail work. That includes cleaning up the chassis, cleaning up the cabinet, doing some fine work, also adding an audio input device, which should be easy. There's also a few screws that were missing. I want to replace those. I'll need to get a tuning eye, which I forgot, even though I was over at the museum today, so my fault. Not a big deal. Anyway, I'm just taking it easy on this guy because it's going so well. I want to make sure it continues to go well. You start rushing on things, that's when you make mistakes. It's interesting, too, that this Canadian RCA is doing exactly the same as the American RCAs of this time period, which is they would spray the interior with this semi-metallic silver paint. I'm not sure what the idea was. Maybe they thought it would discourage more interference, which I guess could make sense. Or it could just be a marketing ploy. It's like, look how modern that looks. Because when this was new, it must have looked amazing with a shiny new chassis and a glowing silvery looking interior. That's just me though. I work in marketing, so that's just my guess. I'll stick with it. Okay, well, I spent a little quality time cleaning up the chassis. The chassis is completely viewable from the back, so I just want to make sure that when someone looks in, they see a nice shiny looking chassis. I even try to clean up the wires a little bit. It's little details like that which kind of make a difference. So now that I've done that, it's time to move over to the cabinet and start touching it up. All right, now it's time to move on to the cabinet, which admittedly looks like it's in pretty good shape. And now that I have it out in the sun, I think someone refinished the top but not the front and sides. Oops, got to remove the cap. What I'm going to use is a product called Old English. It's been around forever. Whoever did this did a good job. It fooled me when it was inside, but it's got some scratches and discoloration. I suspect that if it was refinished or partially refinished, it was done a very long time ago. And thankfully it's not polyurethane. It seems to actually be varnish. This polyurethane tends to look like plastic. And even though I'm going to fully admit I've restored wooden sets with polyurethane, just being honest there, I'm not very good at refinishing things. So I'm going to go over the whole thing with Old English. What that'll do is kind of like revitalize the finish a little bit, and then when we finish up, we're going to go over it with Carnauba paste wax to bring back the original shine, because these were pretty shiny when they came from the factory. And then the last thing I'll do to finish up is I'll touch some of these worn areas with a little permanent marker. No one's going to notice. Otherwise, it's in pretty good shape. All right, that's already looking a lot better. A lot of discoloration and scratches were removed. Again, we have some wear marks on the black trim there, but I'll take care of that later. Now, I'm going to go over it with my handy dandy polishing tool. I like to use Meguiar's paste wax, Carnauba paste wax in particular, and a little buffer attachment I got from my drill. Spent some quality time on this. I used to do this by hand, but then it would cramp up my hands, and I figured I'm on my way to getting arthritis. I better do something different. So this saves a lot of time. Okay, so that's after several applications of wax. Brings out some of the character of the wood a little bit more. I think tomorrow I'll touch it up with the black marker, install the audio input, and we'll call it done. Alright, so this is day 3 on this taking it easy episode, and I got this all kind of waxed up yesterday, and I still need to touch this up. I'll do that later. Last thing I'm going to do to the chassis, I definitely want to kind of oil and lubricate some of the bearings for the tuning condenser. Make sure it's moving really easily. It seems like it already is. The volume and tone control, I'm not going to bother cleaning them because they seem like they're perfect. They're not scratchy or anything. So maybe the last time it was serviced, someone did it. So I'm going to leave those alone. Since it does come with an audio input feature already, and we already have a hole drilled through here, someone must have added something at one point. I'm going to go ahead and run a line in and connect it to the inside to these 2 connections here. And I also need to make sure and cut a length of wire so that we can have a nice long antenna for the antenna, because it doesn't have one right now. And we can affix that to the interior of the cabinet so that you don't have to worry about this long thing sticking out the back. Overall, it seems to be coming along pretty well. I suspect, and I might eat my words for saying this, I suspect I might be done with this by the end of this evening. Alright, well, I had a grommet that fit that hole that was there. And what I put these grommets here just in case, someone's going to yank on the cord, which hopefully they won't. The insulation isn't going to rip on the metal here. So what I've done is I've put my right and left channels together through a set of 33 ohm resistors. The other side is ground. And we're going to attach it to these 2 leads in here. We have this one, which is ground, and then we have this one, which goes to I believe the top of the volume control. Okay, so it's hard to see because it's underneath all this stuff, but here's our connecting points. I made sure I pushed everything down because I didn't want to get anywhere this very large resistor, which probably gets a little warm, so I want to make sure that that's well away from that. I put a little glue in that hole too. That seems dirty. I don't know. Anyway, never mind. I am going to clean the contacts. These contacts already look pretty good, I want to put a lot on there. And I'm not going to say what I'm using to clean these with because it causes controversy. But anyway, it works. And if you're familiar with hardware stores, you probably already know what it is I'm using. But you don't need much of it. You just want to get these contacts good and clean. You don't want to soak the crap out of it either. Just make a mess. Might as well get this too, even though it's just mechanical. And everything should move a little bit nicely now. So now that I've got this installed, I'm going to flip it up and oil the tuning condenser. Alright, well, I'm going to start oiling stuff up. And the thing is, this already just moves with the greatest of ease. So I think whoever was in here last time cleaned and oiled it up. But you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. I have this theory that some electronics repair guys are like, oh yeah? Well, I have to leave my mark. It's like cats marking their territory. It lets the next repairman who comes in here not think to themselves, boy, that last person was an idiot. They didn't do what they were supposed to do, even though there's probably plenty of things I've done in this video that people think exactly that. But I just want to make sure that everything moves as nice as it possibly could. Get the bearing back here. It's a little bit difficult to get at and probably also to film. And then we want to get, this is really, really hard to film. This bearing here, and then this one back here. Oh yeah, it's moving like butter. It's not bad, to do that, and it keeps things from wearing out. Yuck. I'm using a zoom spout oil. And one of my friends kind of introduced me to that stuff. It sure works a lot better than 3-in-1 oil, or any other light oil that might be sold in your location. I'm gonna kind of like clean that glass off a little bit And then I'm going to, without putting the bottom on yet, test it to make sure the audio input works, the radio still works and all that, and then I'll take it out and put the bottom on. Alright, before I reinstall the chassis, I'm just going to clean out the dust a little bit in this thing, even though it's pretty clean. But you might as well. Unfortunately, most of the label's kind of gone. This will be gentle. Try to work around the label. And we'll get a little bit at the top of the speaker here. Let's get these cobwebs out of there. Again, you don't have to do this, but I feel like doing it, especially if you can see the back or you can see the innards. So I'm going to put it back in here and take it over the bench and test it out. Alright, now I'm going to put the bottom back on, and I also needed to find 3 bolts because there was only 1 bolt holding the whole thing in there. I had to change the license plate on my truck the other day. It turns out the old license plate bolts are exactly the right size, so I have 3 of those. Well, I actually have 2 of those and then another radio bolt that I found in my stash. I put this little note in here. I figured since other people have left their cute notes, I restored this in 2023. P.S. I used WD-40 in all the pots, which works well. Hint, hint, wink, wink. Probably the next person that'll see this will be 50 or 60 years from now, so who cares? So put that back on, put this back into the cabinet, and give it a test run. Alright, well, we've got this reinstalled, and I forgot I need to touch up some of these scratches, so I got my little Sharpie here. Just fill it in. And yes, if like someone really sticks their nose up to it, they're going to notice it, they're going to see it. But I think that's better than trying to repaint it. Let's see. We got some along the bottom. Not really. Again, there's just like these few spots. There's a little right here. There we go. And a little one right there. Little on the top there. Kind of a little bit along this edge. And maybe just a few blemishes there. Oh, got a little wear here on the very bottom edge. I feel like I'm not very conversational when I'm painting or whatever. Definitely not a Bob Ross where you could just talk about anything. I found some squirrels in the backyard today. I'm gonna feed them. Looks like we got a little bit of crap. A little bit right here. And then a little right there. Maybe just a little. Yeah, just in fact, I think this entire bottom. Well, I've got a mistake here. I need to clean that up like right now. All right, so we got this guy powered up. On this one, you have to control the volume with the phone. Anyway, it's been playing pretty good. Everything's firing on all cylinders. And then our radio is working. Whoops, that's on the wrong wave.
Taste on the black information net. Value because they're ahead of the Knicks. They're going to move on to the next round.
Scott, he does not begrudge Casey Schmidt. It's clear he's going to get them.
Well, I thought I was done, but I'm not out of the woods yet. The audio input is causing interference in the radio. So what I decided to do in turn was go back to the museum and get some shielded cable. And that way I can shield that to the chassis. and eliminate that interference. Usually I don't have a problem like that on sets that have a power transformer, but occasionally I do. So I'm going to see if I can work the bugs out here. Look, I ran the shielded cable. I want to disconnect this. We get good clean radio now. Oh, wrong control.
That's it. Yeah, okay. I mean, I'd have pasta sometimes, but it was nothing. Like, we never had... They had...
Might include a longer antenna with this guy. Yeah, that certainly sounds a lot better. Alright, I'll need to put some other glue in here. I just don't want people to be able to push this in like that. Then I'll put the bottom back on, we'll button it back up, and we'll make sure it all still works. Hopefully it will.
WDVX, that was Justin Tubb with Desert.
Anyway, that's not radio, that's the Bluetooth.
Pearl Butler, Bobby Bear, Yards Full of
And it's ironically,
Alligator Man from Dave Dudley.
Ironically, we're listening to a radio station on a radio, but the radio station is being broadcast online. Anyway, speaking of radio, the radio itself works great.
The Warriors, oh, they're gonna stomp the Lakers. Yo.
About the 2023 McDonald's Change Leaders. They are 10 young black visionaries.
Luckily, the tuning eye is actually pretty good. I wonder if there was a resistor that was bad that I replaced. It's real sensitive. So that circuit's working great.
2023 Change Leaders at mcdchangeleaders.com. A special thank you to Lowe's Home Improvement.
Anyway, here's the inside.
Shares and supports the mission of the Black Information Network.
I'm gonna let it sit here and play for maybe a couple hours just to make sure nothing's going to thermally break down, and then I think that'll be it. Anyway, thanks so much for watching, guys, and hope you all learned something, or if you didn't, maybe you were entertained by my stupid antics. But in the meantime, next time something comes across my workbench, which will be very soon, as we're getting into radio auction season, I'll see you guys next time. Adios.